Well, no, it's how to register.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the other one.
We should have all got that. I've already registered.
Your worship, we are.
I think it has been sent.
Okay, thanks.
out. Yeah, I'm sure it did.
I got the calendar rotation, but I didn't get anything else other than that. Unless it's in the calendar rotation.
Usually it is. Maria usually puts it.
Yeah, so there's two, because we've got like the live presentation
Yeah, yeah.
Q&A session, and then there should be another one that's the regional governance study, and there's a URL in there to join. So that must have been the one that came after you registered.
Calendar rotation was a little looking at.
Maybe you didn't register.
All right. It's 1 o'clock and I'll call today's meeting to order. We have an agenda in front of us. Does anybody have anything to add to the agenda? Okay, I'm going to add 14.1 to the closed session, CAO Council Dialogue. And that's all I have. So just motion to accept as amended. Councillor Fraser?
I so move.
All in favor of that motion? Carried. No delegations, so we'll go right to 4.1. The adoption of the previous minutes. Everybody's had a chance to look at those. Councillor Brown?
The motion that draft regular council meeting minutes of 9 February 2021 be accepted.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Carried. So, let's skip over 5. There's no delegation business, no old business. We'll move on to number 7.1. Under new business, the RFD for vacant council committees. Councillor Alderson's.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Following Councillor's resignation, what I've done is I've created a little table for you as to some of the positions that are required because of the vacancy. So we have the Clearwater Regional FCSS Board. There is an appointment required there that would fill the vacancy created by the resignation. Community Futures, I've received an email from Community Futures indicating that they are requesting that council appoint someone in place of Councillor Alderson. The next meeting to take place there is the 18th. Rocky Library and Parkland Regional. There are 2 appointments there, as well as an alternate that is required for the Parkland Regional Library. The next meeting for the Rocky Museum is not until November, so I don't expect we would need an appointment for that position. And School Resources Officer as well, that they haven't had a meeting in a considerable amount of time, and they're not expecting one because of COVID right now. And then there's the Clearwater Health Professions Engagement Team, which are the council positions are currently filled by public members, so we don't require appointments there either.
So I have a thought on Community Futures. It's a fairly, because you have to go through an orientation, it takes a few different months to do that. I'm just wondering if we shouldn't reach out to Community Futures and just say, maybe we postpone our appointment till after the next election. Would that make sense to everybody?
How often do they meet?
They break for the summer.
Okay.
Renee, did she,
Yeah, I think they meet, I
Is it-
wrote it down in a spreadsheet here.
once a month or not?
Yeah, just give me a moment here, I can pull it up and look.
And then this is the other one. I know that Community Futures would like to have a chamber rep as well. So I'm wondering if that would be, if we could ask the chamber for that as well. Just out of curiosity, I mean, with them joining CAPE, they kind of all go together, but open to other discussion on that.
I think that's a great idea, and then we can just get reports back from the chamber based on the CAPE and Community Futures, and I think that's they all do fit.
As I think Community Futures is an awesome program in our area, and I think it needs way more exposure, and that
People don't
comes
know
through.
about
Yeah, it comes through. I think that it would be a great tool to have the chamber on board there. So, I don't know, what's everybody else's thoughts on that?
That's a great idea.
Yeah,
It's definitely worth having a discussion
Yeah,
with the
okay.
chamber, see if that's gonna fall into their mandate, sure.
Sure. So, what should we do then? Should we reach out to the chamber and have a discussion with them to see if there is an interest in doing that? And then Community Futures? And in the meantime, should some, I don't mind taking part in their February 18th since it's right around the corner. If they need somebody there, and then explain what we're planning on doing.
Your worship, if I could, just in conversing with Community Futures, if you're meeting with them this week, maybe that would be an opportunity for you to talk to them about approaching the chamber to fill that role,
Or should we approach the chamber first and see if that's something that would interest them?
I would say approach the chamber first to see that, to make sure they're on board first, so otherwise we're speaking for them. And also just checking the Community Futures, I'm not sure if they have a terms of reference that says if they have to change that to make that happen.
Yeah, and you have to be accepted to that board as well, so it's a bit of a process, but.
and they do meet monthly, Your worship.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
What would you suggest, Mr. Krause? Should we reach
Your
out
worship,
to-
so I think it would be a conversation with Community Futures to see if they would or could take a member from the chamber
Okay,
first.
okay,
And then we can approach the chamber if that's a viable option.
sure. Just having sat on Community Futures for 3 years, I do know that, unless they've changed something, but yeah, so let's have a conversation.
Then it makes sense that you would go to the meeting, because then you've already at least had the training and whatnot as well, that you covered that spot
Sure.
until.
Sure, well, for February anyways,
Yeah.
but, and then if we decide we want to be there longer, then I think we can have a discussion on if anybody else is interested in filling that spot, if we think we need it before the next election. Anybody interested in that, just in case?
I would be,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And, if it does have to be, a bridge gap until the next election, it may make more sense just because you've had the training
Yeah.
rather than one of us trying to take the training for where they don't meet in the summer and you're only gonna have a few meetings between now and October.
It's been a few years since I've sat on there. So, I mean, I was there the first 3 years in my first term, so 2013, 14, 15, I think, or whatever. But yeah, we'll maybe just do some more investigating and come back with options. Okay.
Yeah, so your worship on that would just be a resolution that the mayor attend the February 18th Community Futures meeting and bring back a report to a March
Sure.
meeting.
Okay. Councilor Phillips?
I'll make that
Okay,
motion.
thank you. Okay, all in favor of that motion? It's carried. Renee, would you be able to get the details in too for the dial-in and stuff like that?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so we have the FCSS board. Just,
I wouldn't mind sitting on the SCS board.
okay. Councilor Ald, I know you don't have many.
No, and that's what I was gonna say, the FCSS would work a little better for me. I'm just looking at the dates and I'm not here on the 24th or 25th of February for library stuff.
Would you be able to do the library?
Yep, I can do library, sure.
Yeah. Anybody else have a desire to do the library, or? No? So Councillor Ald for FCSS, and Councillor Phillips for the Rocky Library. And that would be Parkland Regional, so I'm not sure when they're next, they're usually quarterly. Parkland Regional? The Parkland Regional, because Councillor Alderson sat on Parkland Regional executive and the board. So the executive met more often than just the board. I think the board is,
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the spreadsheet here.
And when Councillor Alderson, that was an elected position
Yes.
on the executive, so Councillor
Yeah.
Ald probably wouldn't be part of that anyway?
Councillor Ald, no, Councillor Phillips, you mean?
Oh, sorry, Councillor Phillips.
It would probably go to someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
No,
pretty
it's-
sure Jason and Councillor Alderson had said that it's an elected position.
It is.
wouldn't
Yeah, I would think it would go back to an election of some
Yeah.
sort.
Yes, and they've already said that they would just keep that spot vacant until the next election, is what Parkland Regional has said. So it would just be at this point, the quarterly Parkland Regional Library meeting, which is every member sends one person there. So there's a member from Caroline, from Clearwater, and from Rocky that go to that. And Sundre is in our catchment area. And then the Rocky Public Library is, I think it's monthly as well.
The Rocky Public Library is monthly, and Parkland, I believe, is quarterly.
Yep, okay. Okay, so I just need a motion to accept. Can we do that in one motion, or do we have to have two?
The motion be in one motion if
Can I?
you wish.
Okay.
I just want, are you on the airport committee, Len? No. Okay. Just the airport public consultations the same night as the Rocky Library meeting, so I just wanted to make sure you weren't double zooming.
I got an alternate on here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your worship, if we could get an alternate as well for Parkland Regional Library?
Okay. Who would like to be Councillor Fraser?
I can do that as an alternate.
Okay, so a motion to accept Councillor Ald to sit on the Clearwater Regional FCSS board.
Should we do an alternate for that? Yeah, well,
No, we don't need an alternate, I don't. For FCSS, I don't believe we do.
No.
Okay. Well, I'll make that motion to accept Councillor Ald to sit on the Clearwater Regional FCSS board. All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Okay, we need a motion to accept Councillor Phillips to sit on the Rocky Library Board, as well as the Parkland Regional Library Board. Councillor Fraser,
I still move.
do I want the alternate?
Oh, am I allowed to make myself the alternate, or does it need a separate motion?
That could be a separate motion.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
Okay, so all in favor of Councillor Fraser's motion? Okay, thank you. And just a motion to accept Councillor Fraser as the alternate for the Parkland Regional.
I'll make that motion.
Councillor Phillips, all in favor of that motion? Thanks. All right, and the rest of them are, as we said, they're good. We're good. Yeah.
We should be all up to speed now. Thank you, Your Worship.
Renee, can you send me a little information on that?
Yeah, I'll do that for both you and for Councillor Fraser's.
Okay. So, moving on to 7.2, the recreation facility naming, sponsorship, and advertising policy. Turn that over to Mr. Clement.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. Yes, so administration is in the process of reviewing all of our policies, trying to meet with Renee's spreadsheet of all the municipal policies that are for review. So we've identified the existing policy, the naming of recreation facilities, as needing a review, and then we've also identified that there is no clear policy related to sponsorship or advertising. So in that being said, we've put together a comprehensive policy related to the naming of facilities, sponsorship, and advertising. And the new policy identifies that the town welcomes and encourages sponsorships and advertising, and it will assist in the provision of town services and projects. Policy applies to all relationships between the town of Rocky Mountain House and businesses, organizations, and individuals that contribute either financially or in kind to town programs, services, spaces, facilities, in return for recognition, public acknowledgement, or other promotional considerations. The policy applies to the naming or renaming of municipal property, buildings, spaces, structures, programs and event partnerships, paid advertising on municipal properties, and all other corporate partnerships, advertising opportunities that currently exist or that may arise in the future. The new policy also outlines the difference between naming rights, which are typically the sponsorships where an external party purchases the exclusive right to name an asset, and legacy naming rights. That's a new term we've coined in the policy, which would involve the naming of recreation facilities and assets after a person or family. And so the policy does outlines a clear process of what would be involved in that. The policy also identifies the responsibilities within our organization to administer the process, set review periods, outline the sponsorship categories and conditions that must be met for sponsors and advertising. And the policy outlines, how funds are to be allocated and who has the authority to enter into sponsorship and advertising agreements and give approval for the naming of facilities. And then, second to that, I know we've been working on updating our sponsorship program, and I've included a draft of that sponsorship package for council to have a look at. So if there's any questions related to any specific items within the policy, we did have an opportunity to seek policies from at least a half a dozen other communities. So I pulled some from our existing policy and some good wording from other communities as well in putting this policy together.
It's a big document. Councilor Narang?
I have two questions. Does this apply to the naming of like the parks and playgrounds?
It would, right? And we would classify under the legacy naming.
Yeah.
And those would be something that, based on the criteria I can't speak to how some of those parks were named or who determined the names of some of those, certainly the neighborhood parks. I'm not sure the process, but in going forward, so that would be, the process now is clearly defined as how we would manage those things.
So just to be clear, then the parks that are already named would remain named those names?
Yes, unless there was something that come forward which we would bring to council to consider a renaming. But the legacy ones are basically in perpetuity.
Sure, okay.
And the other sponsorship, naming rights, basically will have a 5-10-year term. And we would have agreements drawn up with those potential sponsors.
Okay.
Also, the policy does allow that agreements that are currently in place will remain in effect, and then when they lapse and we sort of signing new agreements, then the new policy would take in effect for those.
So where is it where it discusses the sponsorship dollars that come in?
That's 8.5.
Okay, on the...
It's on page 7 of 8.
Okay, let's get there.
And that does, Your Worship, require some council discussion,
Yeah.
because I know we've discussed it administratively. So with the sponsorship dollars, as we've seen in the past year with COVID, that isn't always a reliable source, because they can either expire or you can go through what we did this year. So, for example, the Christensen sponsorship is $60,000 a year. If that suddenly stopped, and then we looked at that as revenue to balance the budget, that's quite a hit to the operating budget. So it's also a discussion, maybe if it's a sponsorship, that those dollars get set aside to a reserve for future projects and recreation or something like that. But keep advertising as part of the general revenue, because that's more consistent. That's a yearly thing that we can adjust to.
That's clearly what I would like to see. Rather than being dependent upon sponsorship dollars?
Yeah, I didn't include that, my apologies. We currently have about $175,000 a year in sponsorships that are allocated to our operating budgets.
Right.
All of the invoices for 2021 have just gone out here the beginning of February, which is our annual invoicing time. So again, we're sort of wondering, what will we hear back for some of our sponsors? All of them currently have 10-year agreements, so they're about halfway through those agreements. But we have lost a couple of sponsors, with Doran Stewart for the fitness center. A couple of the dressing room sponsors have indicated that they can no longer continue with the sponsorship, and they did follow the agreement by giving notice type of thing, but it does have an impact.
So originally, those sponsorship dollars did go to a reserve, correct?
Your worship, I think it was a little mixed
Okay.
in that, but I think if council wants it to go to the reserves or a certain percentage go to reserves, I think I'd like to have Ms. Quinlan present to council how we transition
Okay.
or how financially she feels it would be best.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Durang, I think you had a second part to your question, sorry.
No, actually, that was answered, but I did have another comment based on this conversation that I think that in order, we talk a lot about asset management, and I think that it would be a lot more prudent to be looking at having the sponsorship dollars go into like future projects or something like that, so we're not dependent on it, because that's terrifying when you think of that number, $175,000 that we're putting into operating. I don't think that makes sense at all, so I think we do need to look at that for sure.
Okay, Councillor Fraser?
And it was listed in the policy that unless otherwise discussed with the sponsor. So I guess my question is, would sponsorship dollars be able to go to specific projects or items, or I guess, say ATCO sponsored the power or the utilities, could they still say, this building is lit up by ATCO, or does that start to play into the operational end of things?
When you get into those projects, an example of that is the cooperative park. The co-op and the credit union both give monies that went to the Spring Park project, the capital funding of that project, and in turn they did get 10-year naming rights as part of that sponsorship. And so the way we've worded that is we still have the opportunity to do that for if we have a specific project in mind and we bring sponsors on board, that the funds could, in a sense, it's going into a reserve that's used towards a project as well, as opposed to the operating funds.
Okay, any other questions or comments? So it sounds like we need Ms. Quinlan here for some more information regarding finances.
Yeah, Your Worship, I think we want to explore that more with council.
Yeah, we've had those discussions and
Sure.
and it's, you see, it can go either way, but again, having the discussion with council is what your preference is, because if you don't use that for operating, that's probably like almost a 2% tax increase in order to maintain those operating budgets without those funds.
So I'm thinking we need more discussion on this,
Your Worship, on the finance portion of it.
on the finance portion,
But will it change how the
the
policy?
sponsorship program.
Pardon?
Will it change how the sponsorship needs to be, or the policy needs to be written though?
Your Worship, that would only be in 8.5.
Okay.
So,
We can always amend it or whatever.
Okay, so what are council's wishes then?
Your Worship, we'd just like to bring back the entire policy with that financial component to the future meeting.
Okay, so we're just accepting this as input today.
The administration bring back the policy to the March 2nd meeting.
Okay. That's the first, okay. Okay, Councilor Auld?
There's no more discussion. I'll make that motion.
So we'll have more discussion on the 2nd of March. Okay, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Okay,
Did you have any questions about the sponsorship package? That was sort of the second.
right.
It looks good.
Yeah, it does, it looks great.
We've just included in there the potential new sponsorships in there. We didn't include any of the one-pagers with our existing sponsors. I've identified, on the second page of that, sort of, here's what we currently have sponsored, and here's some of the opportunities that are available.
Are we sending that out? Do we have, to?
I was waiting for council to accept as information, and then I can send that out. I did have a meeting actually on Friday with a local businessman who was interested in perhaps some sponsorship or advertising opportunities. So.
Do I need to make a motion? Or? Okay, I'll make a motion that we accept the sponsorship package for information.
Okay, everybody clear on that? Okay, all in favor of that motion? Carried. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so we will move on to number 8.1. Clearwater County correspondence to the town regarding Evergreen Co-op public recycle drop-off location. So we all have the letter, this letter from Clearwater County. And Clearwater County would like to maintain the recycling, a recycling depot behind the co-op, which is there now. They would just, I guess, I'm not sure, would they be expanding on that program there, or are they just going to keep it as is? It looks like they're just keeping that depot as is right now. So, yeah, Councillor Narain?
I actually didn't even know that recycling program was operated by the county, or was it operated by Rocky Waste Management? Or
Rocky Waste Management.
Okay, so then now it's the county wants to continue it. I find it difficult to understand, just because the Eco Center is really close to that location. Are they going to lock the bins there so that people that have Rocky passes can't use that? It just seems like a really complicated situation to me. So then after hours, we can just use those bins because everybody can just go use the bins at the co-op because they can't get into the Eco Center. It just seems like it's creating a bunch of confusion.
So I just have a question, also, or not a question, but a comment on even the compacting. And I just kind of feel like with our mixed recycling that we have now, it kind of sends us, it makes sure that the recycling is getting to the proper waste or recycling stream, and it's not being contaminated with the stuff that's not recyclable. So to me, it would just set us back a little bit. It would kind of muddy the waters for our Eco Center. And we have sent that letter to the county asking them to possibly consider coming on board with our Eco Center, as opposed to having a system that is there at the co-op. Because it seems confusing to me. If that's going to be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and ours has limited hours, and we're doing that specifically to make sure that the recycling stream is not contaminated, and so.
But then also county residents are then paying for the recycling of everybody else's stuff too, if it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that's unfair, I think, to county residents that are covering that cost too.
So Councillor Phillips, Councillor Brown, and Councillor Fraser.
And the site that's here and behind the co-op is limited to what it can accept for recycling goods, which again is going to further complicate the matter, because now you would have a limited source and then almost a full meal deal source. It's going to confuse the public, and honestly, why give a dumbed down version of something that already exists and is already going to supply everybody's needs. I don't understand why we would have both.
Okay?
Yeah, and I'm just going to echo my colleagues' comments as well. It's the fact that it's as close as it is to the Eco Center is difficult for me to understand. And the other concern I have is that it's not full service as well. So I think that's going to overcomplicate the situation and perhaps confuse residents.
Plus, we do have county residents that are buying Rocky Passes as well. So that would also be a little bit conflicting, I would think, for them. Councillor Fraser?
I guess if the issue is having access to recycling, I know there was some discussion as to whether there'd be the recycling bins on the outside, so there was 24-hour recycling, but that was when we were all doing it as one entity, or so I guess if the 24-hour recycling is what they're looking for, then that's a discussion I think that we should have with them as to where or how we could maybe meet some of those needs, as opposed to them setting up a separate site with limited recycling.
Councillor Alt?
I think we should wait until we get a response back from the letter, the invitation that we sent to the county to participate in the town eco center. Instead of duplicating services, come on board, provide the service for everybody, all the residents. And it only makes sense. It does not make sense to me to have two recycle depots within 2 blocks of each other.
That's right.
Yeah, and expand on it, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we have to look at our hours, if that's, that's a consideration, then maybe we relook at our hours if the county comes on board. But I mean, 24-hour recycling has proven, like when we had our mixed recycling bin unlocked, the first couple of trips to the MRF in Red Deer proved that it was highly contaminated with garbage, which was sorted. I mean, they sorted. That's what the MRF does, sorts out the recycle from the trash, therefore not contaminating, meaning that our recycling efforts are indeed, like they're worthwhile, so it's still in, a fine-tuned mode, and I look forward to hearing back from the county. And hopefully we can work out some sort of a system that works for all residents of the region. That would be ideal. I know also the landfill isn't open on Saturdays, so possibly we could even request that we look at hours of the landfill to be open on Saturdays to make it more convenient for bigger loads of garbage that need to go out there, or construction or whatever. So. Pardon? Oh, yeah. Okay, can I, so we'll just accept this letter as information?
Your worship, so recommend to council to have a motion that council postpone item 8.1, the letter from Clearwater County dated February 11, 2021, to a future council meeting date once we've received the reply to the town's letter.
Okay.
From the Eco Center.
Okay, Councillor Narang?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Okay, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. And it's 1:32, I'm just gonna call a 5-minute break. Thanks, sorry, I had to get through that motion.